Hello, Iron Sharpens Iron family. This is Trey. Today we're going to talk about dependency and serious emotional disturbance. And the reason we're going to talk about this is because I want to let you know right now, if you have, as a child, ever been diagnosed as having a serious emotional disturbing event in your life, it remains on your record for the rest of your life. And when we have this type of stigma as a child, it does in fact prejudice you as an adult to the point where any type of social misbehavior that you demonstrate will be construed as having a lifelong disability. And that disability then will lead to you needing re-education services. So although this is mostly in reference to family court and issues, it is highly relevant to anybody who is trying to learn government from a deeper perspective. And that being said, this is not intended to give you legal advice or to lead you to any sort of remedy. This is just me kind of demonstrating some of the hypocrisies or circular logic that I keep coming across, and I find it interesting and intriguing to learn more, and I hope that it inspires others to learn more as well. And that also being said, you know, there's been a couple of videos that I've done that I knew would be provocative in nature. One of which, a couple of videos ago, was sovereign citizens. And I knew that that would spark interest in it because I was wondering, and I'm still curious, and I think that if you put in a certain title, such as sovereign citizen, that there are literally people out there just working behind the scenes to see if they can find anything in relation to sovereignty and sovereign citizens. And then they just look for it and just throw crazy comments. I find it hilarious, but also very intriguing and interesting. On that video, I kind of went over a couple of different, I guess, legal theses in a way, because these are from professors of colleges, where they gave their perspective on what a sovereign citizen was and what it means to the community. And I got comments on that were just, I don't know, entertaining from the peanut gallery, I guess. And, you know, here's the thing. I just want to let y'all know my intent here is to learn government. And as I learn it, I'm sharing it with you in hopes that, like I said, you'll be inspired to learn it too. Obviously, I'm going to be giving some opinions of my own, but ultimately it's my hopes that you will develop your own opinions and maybe even do some further research on your own to expound upon those opinions. All expression is welcome because I like freedom. I think freedom's beautiful, whether it's good, bad, ugly, or indifferent. I really think that it's important that we have open discussions about our thoughts, our feelings, to see where it leads us. And maybe even sometimes it could eliminate controversy or hostilities against one another. And that's my hopes for our future someday. So sometimes when people comment, they get very hostile and angry and abusive. And I'm okay with that. Like, that's fine by me. But if anything I'm saying that might spark, you know, some sort of hostility or anger, I really would love it. I mean, I invite you to have an interview with me because I like to explore, you know, that's what I'm learning. I want to learn about what makes someone so angry or hostile towards a person or a group of persons just out of the blue. Like what makes that happen, you know? So if there's anything that upsets you, please feel free, you know, go ahead, comment. We'll set up an interview and we can talk about it. I like open discussion. I think it's healing. So if you're willing to come on and you want to share how much anger and hatred you have towards a certain group of persons or me individually or whatever, I would love to hear more about it. But all that being said, let's carry on. So today we're going to talk about, again, the dependencies and disabilities of persons. So this is specifically out of Tennessee Code. It might be different or, you know, slightly different in other states. It's not likely going to be completely different. So just keep that in mind if you want to do further research in your own state, that there could be subtle differences in there, but or different places in which you can locate some of the information. So we are talking about what it means to cause a harm to child's health or welfare. So an inflicted mental injury means an injury to the intellectual or psychological capacity of a child as evidenced by a discernible and substantial impairment in the child's ability to function within the child's normal range of performance and behavior with due regard to the child's culture. Due regard to the child's culture. Again, if we have only one culture working in our nation, then we have a good way of determining what the majority of the children behave like. I don't find this to be a very accurate way of measurement, because each child to me is different. So when we talk about behavior, you may think my child is misbehaving. I might think your child is weird because he's too overly behaved. So it depends on the perspective of the person who is dealing with the child. And that's why I'm bringing this to the forefront, is because everybody has a different perception. Even if you go to the experts, you will find conflicting conclusions in their theory. So how do we really decide if a child's behavior or performance is somehow a mental injury? That boggles my mind. Perhaps you understand it better than me and can explain it. Again, if that's the case, I welcome you on to break it down. If we got anybody out there who might be into sociology or psychiatry, I am all open ears for this, because this is, to me, hypocritical and circular logic. When you mix law with psychology, it becomes an ugly, ugly thing. But here we go, mental injuries. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up, like I said, is because, as you see, a mental injury doesn't mean that you've psychologically tortured the child into this frame of mind where he's completely just obvious messed up. It could be something just about behavior. Maybe he's got the wiggles and he can't sit still and behave in class. And maybe he goes to a care provider who he doesn't hold on to that little rope, that little rope where they make him walk behind him with the little duckies. Maybe he just can't focus on that. Is this going to be considered to be a mental injury of the child, and then therefore lead to a prejudicial preconceived notion of the child when he's in any other classes or school or activities? I don't know. It's kind of scary, because what happens when a child experiences a serious emotional disturbance? It is considered an event. And that event is recorded at the Vital Statistics Office. So if you go through family court and you get a divorce and they change custody of the child, this is considered to be a recordable event, and it is clocked in to his personal profile, and it stays with him forever. Now, what happens between the parents happens between the parents. I'm not real crazy about the idea of stigmatizing our children because of parents not being able to stay together. Keep in mind that for a long time, the statistic rates showed that the divorce rate was somewhere in the range of like 50 to 60%, depending on, where you pulled your information from. But I actually just saw a video. I haven't had a chance to dig into it too deeply, but this guy is saying that the reality is the divorce rate is 95%. That's huge. So if he's correct in what he's saying, then 95% of children that were conceived in marriage may be construed as having a mental injury and therefore having an intellectual disability, and they become a target of the government. I don't think that's right. Well, again, it's up for you guys to decide on your own. That's just my personal opinion on it, but we'll get through it and you decide. So these mental injuries that lead to intellectual disability, like I said, if that type of social misbehavior continues after the age of majority, then they will consider that to be a lifelong intellectual disability. And therefore, if you are intellectually disabled, you may be incompetent to handle your own affairs. And therefore, the government is required to protect your Social Security rights because you are entitled to state grants and aid for your intellectual disability in order to therapeutically correct it, right? Talked about that lots of times, but I'm gonna keep saying it until you get it, like I told you. So let's look a little deeper into this whole mental injury issue. I'm gonna bring forth for you the definition. Okay, so serious emotional disturbances. This is the child's one, individuals birth to 18 years of age, okay? So if you meet this, if your child meets this criteria in a specific way, then they are going to be considered to have a serious emotional disturbance. And like I said, they become targets because, and you'll notice it, if you pay close attention, what happens if your child is, you know, wiggly in class, all of a sudden, the next thing you know, he's getting services from school. These are federally funded programs. He might have to go and see a counselor. He might have to go into a special classroom for children with behavioral disorders. Here's my thoughts. If I'm a babysitter and I take care of a bunch of kids in my home, their little wiggles don't really bother me. I love kids, so I don't feel, unless the kid is like way crazy, you know, they just don't bother me. Their behaviors don't bother me. I think they're cute, and you know, sometimes it causes for you to have to do more chasing around or more work for the little hyper ones, but I don't find that to be disruptive. I find that to be normal. So maybe I'm abnormal. I don't know. You guys tell me if this is something, but you know, if that's the way kids behave and I find it to be disruptive and I can't handle it, then I would be in the wrong field. There's no reason for me to deal with children if I find them to be disorderly. That just doesn't make sense to me. Maybe it does you. I don't know. So a child who possesses a diagnosable serious disorder under DSM-5, such as pervasive developmental disorder, childhood schizophrenia, schizophrenia of adult type manifesting in adolescence, conduct disorder, affective disorder, and other disruptive behaviors that could mean anything, or other disorders with serious medical implications such as eating disorders or persistent involvement with alcohol or drugs. So I'm not really concerned with those because those make sense to me, but the conduct disorder, affective disorder, and other disruptive behaviors is a broad spectrum. I don't know. So B, who has a functioning level which includes either a moderate impairment in at least 4 of the categories, a severe impairment in 2 of the categories, or an extreme impairment in one of the following areas. So let me just say this before we get involved. If your family goes through a divorce, your child is definitely coming out as diagnosed serious emotional disturbance. There's no way around this. I mean, moderate impairment in at least 4. Okay, so how do we determine that? So at least 2 of these are a guarantee if you go through a divorce. So number 4, family. Disruption of family relationships. Family does not function in a unit and experiences frequent turbulence. Relationships that exist are psychologically devastating, lacks family support, abused, or neglected. So when we go through divorces, it is customary for a family to separate, which is non-functional, right? And frequent turbulence, well, what do you think's going on in that room? So if you walk in there just to get a normal divorce, you'll have one attorney barking in the ear of one of the parties to create turbulence between the 2 that may not have otherwise existed. It's very lucrative, very, very lucrative indeed, because when your child is considered to have this disability, they then are entitled to federally funded services. And those entitlements must be provided to them by the court. And that's why we keep in this circular, horrible court circumstance when it comes to families. It's just not the place for families at all. I can't express that enough. But so that's just one that we can definitely say any observer or evaluator is likely to check that box that a moderate impairment at minimum occurs when the disruption of family occurs. No way around it. Number 9, caregiver resources. So the caregiver has difficulty providing for the child's basic needs or developmental needs, such that there is a negative impact on the child's level of functioning. During these times, I'm going to be willing to bet that a child does go through a period of time where their levels of functioning decreases, because it's an emotional thing. And I think that's normal. And I don't think that means the child is disabled. I think that, it's just a part of life, the ups, the downs, the lefts, the rights. It is what it is. When they say that the caregiver has difficulties providing for basic needs and developmental needs, okay, so what are we talking about here? Basic needs in my mind would be food, shelter, clothes, okay? If we got that covered, now we have to analyze developmental needs. That is a broad spectrum. If a caregiver is going through a divorce and it is difficult to manage the court case, your job, all these other things that are going on, there is an emotional turmoil for both parties, both adult parties. So is this going to be perceived as having difficulty providing the developmental needs of the child? I mean, honestly, when we divorce, I guess you could say that there would be a lack of developmental needs, because to me, a child is in his best position if he's got both parents. But in this case, both parents are not going to be available. So his emotional development at that time may halt or slow down, but it doesn't mean it's never going to develop. Hard times is a part of life, man. I don't know. And I believe in staying together for the sake of the children. And I believe in, in marriage and things. But the way things are going, if we're at over a 90% divorce rate, then you can count on the fact that a child being prejudiced is going to definitely at least meet the two categories here right off the bat, just from stepping foot into a divorce court. Now, don't let it be a CPS case, because then we can guarantee that the child's probability of becoming a intellectually disabled being, according to this, would be more of a severe impairment or an extreme impairment. And this is very great for the courts, because if we have these types of diagnoses going on, the grant money will flow, because state insurance covers intellectual disabilities such as this. So now that we know two of these criteria are likely to be met, let's look at the others. So one would be their feeling, mood, and affect. Uncontrolled emotion is clearly disruptive in its effects on other aspects of a child's life. Frustration, anger, loneliness, and boredom persist beyond a precipitating situation. Symptoms of distress are pervasive and do not respond to encouragement or reassurance. Well, in my experience, a lot of kids do not respond to encouragement or reassurance. Little monsters like what they like when they like it, and they want it when they want it. Sometimes they do this. So how are we analyzing that, and to what extent is the concern? It's, again, another broad statement, so not a fan of it. Frustration, anger, if it's constant, yeah, sure, why not? But boredom, I don't know, like, kids are bored. It's kind of their thing. I wouldn't think that should be a relevant factor, but that's my opinion. Again, if you have more experience in this area, please let me know. Their thinking, disruption of daily life due to impaired thoughts and thinking process, inability to distinguish between fantasy and reality, unusual thoughts or attachment to objects. I would hope that this is applied by an age specification, because smaller kids tend to have attachment to objects. So I don't know how they weigh in on that, but I'm hoping that's be the case. I don't trust that to be the case, but you decide. So substance use, I think that's an obvious. Family disruption, we went over that. Interpersonal, severe inability to establish or maintain a personal social support system, lacks close friends or group affiliations, socially isolated, lacks age-appropriate skills. Again, this is broad. I have a niece who's a bully, man. That girl is mean. Oh, I can't tell you just how much. My child's friends came to me at one point and said that they were no longer going to play with him if she kept coming along because she's just mean. However, she's not isolated. So she would be considered to be in good health socially and mentally because she's able to still partake in social activities and desires to do so, but she is literally the little bully in the group. I mean, let's face it, is that better than one who may not be really socially inclined? I know quiet kids. I know a lot of quiet kids. I don't think anything's wrong with them. So some people are introverts and just prefer to be alone. So I don't see that as being an issue myself if they're looking at that. And another question would be if it's a divorce issue, are we looking at what the child's social behavior was like prior to the divorce? What if they were always an introvert and they still remain an introvert? Are we going to use that against you? I don't know. It's too broad. I don't like it. So to maintain a personal and social support system, like I said, how big does it have to be? 1 friend, 5 friends? I don't know. Let's see. So role performance. Frequent disruption of role performance, an individual is unable to meet usual expectations. Persistent behavior problems, failure, suspension, or expelled from school. Yeah, I'll leave that to you guys. Social legal. Inability to maintain conduct within the limits of prescribed law, rules, and strong morals. Shows little concern for consequences of actions. Delinquent acts and or frequent contact with law enforcement. All right, delinquent acts, frequent contact with law enforcement, I'll leave that one alone. But inability to maintain conduct within the limits of law. Are we expecting that ignorance of the law is no excuse for a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old? I find that to be crude, to be real honest. And strong morals. How strong do those morals have to be? Everybody here has a different culture. Some people might say a Christian family who teaches Christian principles, that child might have strong morals. But what if the next family doesn't have Christian principles? Are their morals weak? How are we weighing in on that? Self-care, basic needs. The ability to care for self is considerably below expectation. If you have boys, oh man, sometimes they don't like taking care of oneself. I don't know what that's about. This isn't reflective of my own child because he's a pretty boy and loves to be clean and shiny. But I have several friends with sons, and for whatever reason, through the teen years, I don't know what's going on there, but they get lazy. I don't think that means they have a social defect or inability. I just think it's like a part of life, just the basic stuff that happens as we grow, perhaps. And it could be that way. So if you can now say for sure a family going through divorce meets 2 of these criteria, and you have yourself a boy who is being lazy, now you've just met number 3, right? And if you have a child who is maybe hyper or whatever and got the wiggle worms in school and the teacher is not capable of maintaining her patience with that child, he's the problem, not her. So this can add up to me to be, I don't know, just totally illogical, unreasonable, and unfair in the sense that this, like I said, this sticks with the child. I have so many friends who were complete idiots when we were kids. I think almost everyone can say that. And they've grown up and they do not behave the same way they did as teenagers. It's kind of the natural order of things. Yeah, they did some stupid stuff, but today they are actually nitpicking the kids, like little old men. Oh, look at that kid with his pants down to his knees. Oh my God. But they don't remember that they were looked at the same way by other adults. So I just find this to be way judgmental and not correct. But, if there's someone out there who has more understanding and knowledge of this, please tune in at any time. So now that we understand what mental injuries can be, if you're getting a divorce, did you mentally injure your child? I mean, a mental injury in a family court setting or in a juvenile court setting means an injury to the intellectual capacity of a child. Might be. They might be looking at you like that, and you weren't even thinking about it while you were going through these things. So just something I wanted to point out that I find to be a little bit suspicious. And again, you know, it is what it is. I don't write this stuff, so don't shoot the messenger. So we won't get into all the child protective stuff, but what I did want to show you in here is that the reference of Department of Correction is construed to mean the Department of Children's Services, unless the reference is clearly intended to designate the Department of Correction. I found that interesting because if a child is considered to be, say you're divorcing and he's considered to be intellectually disabled, behaviorally unacceptable, are we actually persecuting the child in these rooms? So while the parents are going through their thing, especially if we have, like I said, a CPS issue, and now we know that the child has an unacceptable behavioral issue, we would need to apply a service that corrects that behavior. So does this mean that the Department of Corrections is correcting the child's behavior and not the parents? Is this what they mean when they say intervention services? Because they're intervening since the early signs of social misbehavior has materialized itself throughout these proceedings, we can now say that the child needs to have intervention of the government so that it doesn't lead to him becoming a social misfit. It would seemingly mean that, wouldn't it? And I think that's basically what we have. That's why I'm talking about circular logic. The way they have it set up, it's like no child can get away from this. They're always going to capture the child in their system to look as though they have this emotional disturbance, social defect. It's kind of scary. Abuse exists when a person under the age of 18 is suffering from, has sustained, or may be in immediate danger of suffering from or sustaining a wound, injury, disability. So if we're getting a divorce and the child meets the criteria we talked about, has he been abused because now he's suffering a disability due to the divorce? Kind of scary. I don't know. It just makes sense to me that correctional services, intervention correctional services would be applied to someone they believe poses a risk of having a social defect in the future. So adult means any person 18 or older. Child means a person under 18 of age or a person under 19 years of age for the purpose of remaining under the continuing jurisdiction of the juvenile court to enforce non-custodial orders of disposition entered prior to the person's 18th birthday. So when we are looking at Juvenile Act, it's specific to kids that are under the age. So something else that I wanted to get into here, unruly. Love this. This is one of my faves right here, unruly. In no event shall a person 18 years of age or older be committed to or remain in the custody of the Department of Children's Services by virtue of being adjudicated dependent and neglected, unruly, or in need of services. So once they hit the age of 18, they will not remain in the custody of the department, but it's seemingly that they can still be adjudicated dependent and neglected and unruly. When does that option cease to exist? I don't know, but interesting nonetheless. So really the point of sharing, like I said, is that I wanted to kind of point out some of the circular logic that it's almost like a net. It's a net that all of our children are going to get caught up in, at least by a 90% chance if that statistic is correct. And that's a scary thought. And I don't know, like I said, maybe you see it differently. Let me know. Put your comments in the section below, or click on the subscribe button if you haven't already. Click the bell so that you can receive notices for more videos that will be coming to you. I have a lot more to go over when it comes to this psychological court setting. And I think that it's a lot to learn, but it's important to learn because it's our civic duty to learn government. And we've not really been doing that. That's why we're so confused when we get involved with these people, because we really haven't taken the time. So hopefully this inspires you to take the time, and certainly as I keep learning, I will help you to learn as well. And if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a fantastic day.